Record to this computer. Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's so glad I'm so glad we finally connected.
Well, we connect all the time on the 80s cruise. You've been on how many of them? Have you been on all of them?
Almost, well, a lot of them. My husband and I started in 2017, and we missed one of them. It was actually because of my book launch that we had to skip, what was it, 2024. But
Oh, wow.
otherwise, yeah, we've been on it since 2017.
Crazy. I see you every year come through for Pop Icon costume party, and you must have won it. What, you surely should have won it a few times by now, right?
Yes, yes, we've won three times and we've podiumed once. So that is
Crazy.
massive bragging rights because these costumes that, as you know, the guests come up with are absolutely phenomenal, mind blowing. And I love that there's just as many weird people out there as me. So keep them coming.
You talk about your book launch, and that's what we're here to talk about today. The book is called Pretty Wrecked: Confessions of a Teen Addict and Her Road to Recovery. You have a subtitle as long as the subtitle for my book. I used to have it written down on an index card and stare down at it when people would ask me what the name of the book was. When did you realize your story was just not something you just survived, but something worth writing down?
So it was actually after COVID. I'm not to have a spoiler alert, but during COVID, I had, oh my gosh, I think I had 24 years sober. That's insane. First of all, that's crazy to have 24 years sober. And COVID was really hard for all of us to go through. But as a person in recovery, having all of my tools and community kind of taken away was felt really, really hard. And then of course I just sat and watched everybody drink bottles and bottles of wine for months. And that was really hard. So it was after I got through COVID, I realized that my recovery was such a gift. Like I'm so strong and it's such a blessing to have been in recovery that long. And I just felt like I needed to share how awesome it really is and how lucky I felt and how grateful I am. And it just kind of poured out of me for whatever reason.
Would When I first heard the term recovery memoir, I, I was expecting something really heavy. I was almost a little intimidated by your book at first when I the concept of it, but as
Mhm.
soon as I opened it up, I mean, humor, attitude, personality, all over it. How important was it to kind of reflect your voice and not just an addiction story?
The funny thing is, the I knew I wanted to write the book as vignettes, so kind of like short stories. Because when I've read memoirs, there's times I'll read a memoir and I'll be like, okay, like get to the good stuff, and so then I thought, well, what if I just wrote all good stuff, like all the stories, and showed my descent into addiction through stories, and then my, coming out of addiction and into recovery with recovery stories. And my book would, I guess, be under the genre of quit lit. That's kind of what they call it. Like,
I love that.
yeah, it's great. So I knew I wanted to write it as vignettes, and what I ended up doing was really writing the stories in first person as if I was still there. So kind of like when we lost our home, I literally kind of like went into being in the home. Like I was 16 again. I was opening the front door, which was very emotional to like relive a lot of that. And at the same time, very healing. And so I knew that I wanted it to be a real voice in the moment, and then I turned it into past tense. So I think what ended up, it was just luck. I didn't that wasn't like a grand scheme of mine. It just happened that that's how I wrote it. And I think that's what made it seem so approachable, like you were talking about, because it was literally as if I was in the moment writing the book.
One of the reasons we're talking too is because this story begins in the 80s.
Mhm.
Can you kind of take us back to where you feel it started? Like what's the year? What's the entry story? What's the first experience with,
Sure.
a
So,
drug?
yeah, so I would say most of the stuff that I went through, because my father was an alcoholic and neglectful, and my parents got divorced when I was 6. And then my stepfather came into the picture and he made my father look like Prince charming. Um, and that was in the late 80s. So I want to say that was like around like 87, 88 is when my stepfather really came into the picture and things went downhill from there. I started using in 92 is when I officially started using, but like I was just a train heading in that direction emotionally with all that was going on. Um, and eventually I was like, well, I feel like shit. And drugs make me feel really numb, which is a really nice relief. And then it kind of spiraled from there.
What I'm so impressed with when I'm reading it, and you talk about putting your mind back there. I mean, the fact that there's so much detail to these vignettes when you're under the influence. I mean, are those moments really that clear still in your mind? I mean, when I think back to some of my blotto stories of the 80s or 90s or even 2 years ago, it's the lack of detail, I think, that distinguishes them.
So, yes, I do remember. I would say I didn't tell stories that I didn't remember. And in fact, it was really fun to have some of my friends that are maybe mentioned in the stories call me up. I changed almost everybody's name, but to call me up and say, that was exactly how it happened. I can't believe you remembered that story. So that made me feel good. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. But what I remember, not only in addition to the details, but were the feelings. And I think that's what people connect to in the story. I mean, yeah, you can connect to the details and all of the references and posters or clothes or all those things, but it's those feelings of being a teenager and angst and frustration and pain and and then some really fun times using, frankly. I mean, I'm not going to make it like it wasn't obviously all bad. I mean, you don't keep going back to something that wasn't good. So I think that's what was relatable for people were those feelings behind the stories.
I know for me when I'm reading it, obviously as a American college student in the second half of the 80s, I have certainly seen my share of pot and booze. But there's parts where you start talking about it's mushrooms at one point that becomes like, and I've never even there's the list of drugs I've never seen, you know, in person is a very long list. I guess I've just been sheltered or whatnot, but mushrooms becomes your drug of choice, and I was
Uh,
really infatuated by the stories of that.
so like I absolutely hallucinogens were my favorite. I think I remember them saying like if you did acid 7 times, you were like clinically insane. Do you remember that saying?
No, no.
Okay, so well then I'm way off of my rocker, like way off. Funny story. And again, I can laugh at this stuff now. It is a heavy topic, but like the stories are ridiculous. Funny story that I did not put in the book that drives my family crazy to this day is one time I was on a large amount of acid and somebody was driving me home and I had to direct them how to drive me home, right? There's no phones, there's no MapQuest, there's no, you just had to know directions. And I was telling them how to drive me home and I'd be like, okay, so yeah, up here, like turn right. And so the person would go to turn right and I'd be like, no, turn right. And I'm like, I am turning right. And what ended up happening was my left and right got switched in my brain on so much acid. And to this day, if I have to tell somebody directions out loud, I still verbally say left or right incorrectly to
Wow.
this day. So like it does have lasting effects. They always like, oh, this is gonna mess you up forever. Some,
Really?
oh yeah, I cannot say left or right out loud without having to pause and almost be like, right, okay, left, yeah. Uh, it
No.
drives my family crazy because I'll be in the car instructing them and my husband I'll say like, okay, turn right up here. And he goes, are you sure?
Yeah, that would get annoying. Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
sorry, too much acid. Sorry.
the only experience I never took acid, but a lot of my friends did in the late 80s. And the moment I decided I was never gonna do it, we'd all back in those days you would get a hotel room on the beach and you'd squeeze 10 people into it for, Memorial Day weekend.
Of
And
course.
three of my friends did acid. We were all into the night, everyone's in bed sleeping. I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, whatever time it was. And three of them are just the three that took acid are in chairs 2 feet from my bed, just staring at me, just bug eyed staring at me. And freaked me out. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're not talking to me. I'm like, what are you doing? And they're not talking to me. I guess they were up for like 24 or 48
Oh
straight
yeah.
hours.
Oh
And
yeah.
afterwards, they told me, oh, do you remember me waking up and talking to you? They're like, nope. They
Yeah.
said, we were watching a movie. I'm like, there was no movie. It was
Nope,
just
I
me
was the
sleep.
movie. It was me.
And I was like,
So,
I don't
so
think I
that's
need it.
good. I'm glad. So they were like this example of like, okay, maybe I don't want to do that. I was that example for lots of my friends. I was the example of like, maybe we shouldn't do that because that doesn't look like it's okay. So to all of my friends, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Um, putting things back in the 80s again, it's notable that in your story you talk about what you were listening to, the posters that were on your wall. I'm not sure how to word this question, so I'm going to kind of ease into it. It's not a traumatic question.
Mhm,
I'm just curious. I'm the last person in the world to blame the music of the 80s for living life like you're going to die tomorrow.
mhm,
But I also admit that as a writer and journalist myself, it's hard to separate the historic hard drinking lifestyle of writers
mhm.
with my own history of drinking, which I've talked about on the show for the last year or so. I'm curious if you either found a connection then or you find a connection today between the pop culture of the time and whether and how it maybe enabled you to more easily become an addict.
So I would say it's a yes and yes. And m- I, what was driving me was what I was going through and kind of the trauma that I was going through with my stepfather in particular, and then the loss of our home. And you can read more about that in the book. It's very messy, but that's what kind of drew me to certain music. So it was kind of both, right? The music was there for me to choose to kind of go down that path, right? Like I found myself getting darker and darker emotionally. So I turned to music that was darker and darker. You know, what started out as very like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and pop, turned into, like, it probably went like Bon Jovi to like Poison and Skid Row into Motley Crue, right? Like the progression. And then you start to get into like the early 90s of kind of like angst with like Nirvana and stuff like that. So I feel like the music and my emotions matched up. So I can't blame the music, and I still love all of that music today. And then after that, like once I started really drinking and using, then it's kind of I don't want to say it's a blur, but like then just music was, and then I got into Grateful Dead and all of that stuff because that's kind of what I was around those people.
Sure. Yeah.
But
No.
um, but I
You-
have wonderful memories of the music, even now, even with my history. I still have posters of Motley Crue and Bon Jovi up on my walls in the basement, so
and you don't, when you see those posters and you hear that music, it doesn't give you a flashback.
not now. So it's been a hot minute since I've used and drank. In the beginning, it did. So in recovery, there's something called people, places, and things. And they say, stop seeing the people you were hanging out with, stop going to the places that you used to go to that might trigger you, get rid of things that have like associated memories of like using or drinking. And so I did. So I listened to that and I got rid of all those things. Now there were a lot of things I couldn't get rid of. So I just was like, can I put these in a box and kind of like put them in the attic? And I'm grateful that I did because to this day I still wear all of those vintage Grateful Dead shirts to sleep in, and my kids borrow them and they think they're the coolest. So I'm glad I didn't get rid of any of those. But so I definitely had to take a beat from that stuff. But once I really got my feet under me and really had some good, strong recovery, then I could introduce those things back in. And now they're part of my story. I don't want to not look at it, right? They like you can look at your past, but don't stare. That's not the direction you're going. That's one of my favorite sayings. Like I can look, but like I'm not going that way. I'm going forward. And so I love having them. I mean, I go on a cruise every year where I'm exposed to all of this 80s music and I love it. It's my favorite week of the year.
Let me ask you this about the cruise. The 80s cruise is intense. I mean, everything about it is 120 miles per hour, that you've got 45 concerts, things go nearly 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But one of the key, I wouldn't say it's a key aspect, but everybody gets a free drink package. There is certainly a lot of boozing going on. Is that tough for you?
Um, no. So I would say not usually because I have learned how to have fun and kind of throw caution to the wind with no alcohol. In fact, the joke is my husband always says when I order a Coca-Cola, he's like, "Oh shit, things are gonna get real," because like I do not need any additional help. And so if I'm gonna drink like a soda, get like the caffeine and get some extra energy, then everybody should look out. But I would find that there's maybe one day on the boat that for whatever reason um it just goes a little too far and I don't know why that is and I don't know it's usually like halfway through and I usually find that's the day where I might be like, you know what, I'm just gonna like maybe back off a little bit everyone today. Because it just well it's also you get to the point where you're like I can't talk to you. I mean, you know this. You get to the
Oh
you
yeah.
know I'm like I can't really have a conversation with you. You're spilling your drink on me. You're not making sense. I don't want to parent you. I'm on this boat to not be a parent. Like, I don't want to have to like parent you. So that's usually the time when I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna take a beat back and go watch any of the amazing movies that are playing in my cabin all day. So,
That happens to me too. There's usually one day, and it's usually it's a lot of times it's a port day where we roll into somewhere like Nassau or somewhere where there's a lot of bars offering cheap drinks, strong drinks,
hmm.
or little booze cruises where you go out on a sailboat for the day and drink all the rum punch you want, and then you get back on the boat. Those are the days where I try to maybe spend more time, in the solarium or something like
Yes.
that.
Yes. Trying to recover your voice, right? I mean,
That is
because
a common problem. Yes.
even as a non-drinker, having never drank on the 80s cruise ever, I do not know how people are alive by day seven because I feel like I am going to. I always say if this cruise was 8 days long, I would be dead. And I'm not even drinking. Like I am having like water. And by day seven, my voice is shot. Everything hurts. I feel totally dehydrated. So I don't know how people add the alcohol to it, but
I, even on my best days, I'm good for maybe 3 hours of drinking, and then my body is tired. I'm ready to go to bed. I've hit my limit. So yeah, I when I see people who start at 8 in the morning and finish up at 2 in the morning, I always kind of it's just I stare at them and wonder how you're able to do it.
yeah.
So
And sometimes I'm like, you know what, no judgment, right? You're on your vacation and maybe
yeah,
you don't.
yeah,
A lot of people are like,
you be
this
you.
is, and I would say even my husband says he probably says he has 75% of all of the alcohol he'll have all year on the 80s cruise. Um, so, and he drinks and it does not bother me at all. We met when I think I had about 7 or 8 years sober. So I was pretty well established at who I was and how I felt and what I could or could not be around. And so I call him a normal, people that can just like drink alcohol normally. So he's a normal and he can take it or leave it. And so, but he probably has the most alcohol on the cruise of what he would do all year long.
Wow. I was gonna ask, whether or not he drank and whether or not that was how that what kind of impression that made on you. Interesting.
It does not bother me. And he's pretty good about listening. Like there's always one night on the cruise where I'll have to recommend he pause and I'll say, is that drink going to make tonight more fun or is it going to make tomorrow worse? And I never say, so I'm very big on like, I'm never going to tell you yes or no. I'm just going to throw some information out there and you're going to do whatever you want with it. And that's even the way I parent my kids. So I have two teenagers and I always say, I'm never going to tell you yes or no, but I'm going to give you the information and then you're going to need to choose. And it's kind of like a little tricky way of like they are listening and then they end up, you know, the majority of the time. And I say to them, you don't need to get every decision right. You need to get more right than wrong. You're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes, but just get more decisions right than wrong. But so with Mike, I will say to him, is that drink going to make tonight more fun or tomorrow worse? So just think about that. But you do you.
As a husband, I think I would read between the lines and say, you know what, cancel that drink, or I'll just have a club soda. If anyone says that to me, I think that's a hidden sign. I always tell people if you ever see me grab a cigarette or a cigar or ask for any tobacco product, that means I have long passed the point of having too many drinks, and
Hmm.
you must immediately put me to bed. So
Hmm.
that's like
All right,
the
good cue. I'll keep that in mind. I'll remember that.
that being said, I haven't touched tobacco in years. You you talked earlier about one of the things about recovery is, you know, the people you hang around with and having to say goodbye to them.
Hmm.
And it's a really poignant part of the book where you call up your friends, the ones that who were with you during those some of these outrageous adventures, and some of whom you had to lean upon to live with when things got tough at home,
Hmm.
and you had to say goodbye to them. That must have been, I can't even imagine the emotions that were going through your mind.
So it was very scary because it's as if somebody pushed the reset button on my life when I decided to quit using drugs and alcohol. And it was like, oh, by the way, so my one counselor at my second rehab, because why have one when you can fail out of one and have two? One of my counselors at my second rehab, I remember saying after I was all in, after I was like, okay, things need to change. What do I need to do? And he said, well, there's only one thing you need to change, honey. Everything. And I was like, well, oh shit. And he's not wrong, but it was scary to leave all those people. The other thing is, those people didn't really love that I was basically saying to them, hey, I have a problem. I need to get myself together. I need to stop doing this. And I can't be with you because that was kind of a mirror for them, right? So if I had a problem and
And
they
they
were
have a
using
problem.
exactly, and we were using the same way, they probably have a problem and they were not ready to address that. So that was, we had some falling out because I kind of was the mirror saying, hey, this isn't normal, guys. Yeah.
Is there a part in your life where you can bring them back in? Are you able to bring them in now? Are you able to talk to them, or keep in touch?
So some of them I have, some of them I've been in touch with, and others, again, I really don't know what we'd connect on. Like our relationship was about like, how do we get it? Let's use it. How do we recover from it? Rinse and repeat. Like that was our relationship. We weren't like friends. We were like assisting each other in our addiction. There is one person though, in the book who was my roommate in college, and I have tried to find her. She was just a very big love of my life. And I have not been able to find her. And the only thing that I have not checked is the obituaries. And maybe I just don't want to check the obituaries, but I can't find. I mean, we've hired services to try to find her. We've, done the whole Facebook and Instagram, and I've contacted her family members, like I'm looking for this person. And so if
I that
anybody
was
out there wants to go find her for me.
that was my next question. I got to admit, the part of the book that wrecked me the most was that where you had this person you were so close to. Was it your freshman year at USC? Was that
Hmm.
it? South
Hmm.
Carolina, not
Yep.
Southern California.
Yep.
For those at home, you have you put these little post logs at the end of each
Yeah.
chapter,
Oh, in
and
retrospects, yeah, I kind of
in
like look
retro,
back. Yeah. Hmm.
which I think is just a great tool in the book, and I really looked forward to reading those each chapter. But the one where you say I've not been able to find her, and you just ooh,
Yeah, it
it tore
was,
me
I
up.
do. And it's gonna make me emotional, but I named my daughter after her.
I thought you did. I thought you
Hmm.
did. I
And like, and my daughter kind of teases me and she's like, you're telling me that I'm named after your favorite drug buddy? And I'm like, yeah, but like there was just something extraordinarily deep that we connected on. And we both were a mess, and like I'm not going to blame her for that. I'm not going to blame me for that. I will take responsibility for my choices. But for all of the things that kind of got me there, those were not my fault. I was a child and those things happened to me, but my response was not the healthiest. I will definitely say that. But yeah, no, I really cared about her and I always loved her name and she had the best laugh in the world. And I did. I named my firstborn after her.
Before we both end up crying here, I would love for you to read a passage of your book that means something to you.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I know because you had messaged me that. So there's one passage where I could have gone down that had like a lot of like 80s references, which is the one where it's called Against the Wall. And I kind of talk about my progression based on my posters, right? Like starting with Johnny Depp and then like moving to like Richie Sambora. And then eventually it gets kind of darker and darker as I go. But I actually feel like this chapter, it's called Slippery Slope. I'm hoping that this kind of, for your listeners, does a good job um, summarizing what's happening a little bit in addiction. I mean, you can't just summarize it in one page, but this hopefully does a good job explaining certainly what happened to me. So I've got to put my readers on because, I'm
That's what
not
I'm wearing
20,
right now
I'm
too.
not
Yeah.
25. All right. So this is in the chapter called Slippery Slope. So the definition of slippery slope: a chain of events that once initiated cannot be halted, especially one in which the final outcome is undesirable or precarious. I genuinely believe no one sets out to be a drug addict. That would be ridiculous, right? Nobody tries a little something at a party, a wine cooler or beer or hit of weed, a mushroom or pill, and is suddenly hit with the reality of what one's life will look like in 4 years after trying that one harmless little thing that everybody else was doing at the party. But the truth of the matter is, you have to start somewhere. As innocent and docile as that little something somewhere might be, that very well could lead to something somewhere entirely different. It's a slippery, slippery slope. I had a hit of weed. I loved it. Then I had many more hits. And during those times that I was smoking and drinking, I was exposed to more and more drugs, watching people use these drugs successfully and with pleasure. I would eventually make little leaps in my brain to justify the next thing, to excuse it, to make it seem validated, even. But what I didn't realize was that this was my disease talking. It was growing, progressing, rationalizing these decisions, casually taking me into the next bad decision. All the while, the person I had been was shrinking, and replacing her was a disengaged, cold, selfish junkie.
Wow.
So just a little light reading for everyone. But for me, I think that I wanted people to understand um, that this was not my plan. My plan was just, wow, I feel like shit. I had just gone through a lot. My stepfather was horrible. My dad wasn't there. We lost our home, and I just wanted to not feel. And so the metaphor I use for that in the book, which really teenagers love, I speak a lot to teens that they love, is this idea of a trash can. And so I talk about this kind of trash can of my soul and all of this trash being dumped into my trash can. And then eventually I was like, well, this stinks. This trash can stinks. And that's what the drugs and alcohol did for me. It was almost like it put like the lid on top of the trash can so I didn't have to like see it and smell it and feel it. And then it just kind of progressed from there. Like I didn't plan on it. I don't think, again, addicts, they don't plan on that. Um, it just, it's a series of choices and events that happen. And I'm lucky. I jokingly say at 19 years old, I was given the gift of homelessness because that kicked my ass. Once I got kicked out of my house and I was homeless, I really hit bottom. And I mean, I was 19, so I have not have ever had a legal drink. So yeah, I got sober at 19. And I mean, how lucky am I to basically have been given a book of how to live and how to function and how to relationship and how to, take care of yourself. So what ended up being the worst part of my life ended up being the best part of my life.
Wow. If if you could turn it around, if teenage Tracy could see your life now, what would surprise her the most?
That's a great question. What would surprise her the most? I think just how like solid I am. I mean, I feel like as teenagers, I feel like regardless of whether you're in a traumatic situation, it's just chaos, right? Like your prefrontal cortex isn't developed and everything feels like the external locus of control is out of control and all of these things are happening. And I guess having gotten through that, resolved the trash in the trash can, right? Like once I got sober, I actually had to go through all of the trash in the trash can and actually process it. Um, and so today I have all of those tools and lessons and way of life that I'm just good. Like I'm solid. I don't go to bed with things on my shoulders. If I am frustrated, I deal with it immediately. I'm not afraid to have the tough conversations. I'm not afraid to apologize and own my own stuff. Um, and I think that that was not the person I was. I was very afraid. I was very damaged. I was very insecure. And now I'm none of those things.
So what's next on your list? What other projects are you working on? Will it be a volume two? Where do you see this taking you?
So it's interesting. I don't know. We'll see, right? We'll see. My husband and some people that I speak with want me to write a book called Pretty Wrecked Parenting because I've learned so much through, being in recovery and having, the kind of genetic component with my father being an alcoholic and then the psychological issues that I had and then the social component of being around it. So I'm able to, and also then I have a degree in psychology. I have my master's degree in counseling psychology. So also from a educational perspective, I'm able to talk to teenagers and to parents about things that do and don't work for those conversations and literally living them, right? I have two teenagers. So like this isn't just the theory, this is practice of like I can tell you what seems to be working well in the conversations I have with my kids. I talk to teenagers at schools. That's my favorite thing to do is speak to high schools. So I have a couple more schools I'm going to be speaking to before the end of the school year. And then I just did a TED Talk.
Oh, wow.
And I know it was terrifying. It was thrilling and terrifying. It's like 90s movie. But you know that scene in Armageddon where Owen Wilson is like, yeah, they're getting ready to go. And he's like, I'm like 90% excited and 10% scared. He's like, well, maybe it's like 90% scared and 10% excited. I don't know. That is what it's like to do a TED Talk. So they're editing it right now. So I should hopefully get that in the next couple of weeks. So I'll make sure to blast that out.
I'm curious. I mean, high schoolers are notoriously sometimes disengaged when it comes to getting advice. Like you
Hmm.
hear it and you sort of have this look on your face like you're this rock, you're impenetrable. Um,
Hmm.
do you what reactions do you get? Do you get questions? I mean, because literally your life should be a big flashing warning sign to them. I mean, if I'm a high school senior or whatnot, and someone's having this discussion with me, I think I have follow-up questions.
For sure. And so one of the not rules, but one of the requests I have for schools is you're going to have to let me curse because I hate to say this, but like cursing is my love language. And it also just, I think, is a little shocking for the teens. And so they're like, oh, okay, this is new. And so it kind of catches their attention. I'm going to be completely honest and I will answer every question I get totally honestly. And to look at their faces when I actually tell them the truth about things or certain drugs or feelings or what I went through, it's like they're not so who nobody's telling them the truth, like the truth. And I also never tell them no. My message to teenagers that I say is yellow light. That's what I call it, yellow light. I'm not saying yes, because first of all, technically it's illegal for you. I'm not allowed to tell you you can do this shit. It's, and don't because you're messing with your brain development. But that's boring science. And I say it. I'm going to talk about some boring science for a minute. And I'm not trying to be an asshole. This is just the science. So like, don't hate me for this. But like your brain is two-thirds developed. Like a brain doesn't fully develop till 25 years old. So like you're messing with it. But anyway, side note. But I say to them, yellow light, just pause. Think, is this decision at this party in this moment going to move me towards what I want, what I'm thinking for my life, what I'm expecting, what I'm hoping, or is this going to move me farther away? And again, you don't need to get every decision right. You need to get more right than I did. So just like So I was just like, just yellow light, just yellow light. And it seems to work because, I mean, I'll just speak for my own teenager. I would just say to her, just kind of like wait and watch. Just let your friends do these things. Just wait, watch them and learn. I hate to say this, but like learn from their mistakes. Like, right, watch what they're doing and then like don't do that. And it did. And she's very capable of going to parties. She's often the designated driver, tells us what she's doing, when she's doing it. I'm always like, just don't be sneaky. Just tell us the truth. And I I'm very lucky. It seems to work. Just the pure honesty. And I'm not perfect. She knows that. I've made lots of mistakes in my life, and she's allowed to make mistakes too because she's a human. And so, so my husband wants me to write Pretty Wrecked Parenting.
I think that's a good idea, to be honest. I really do. I think that's smart.
Because it's like, as a drug addict, what do I tell my kids, right? Like, it's kind of an interesting spin to it. So,
No, I mean it was one of the first questions on my list was how much of this do your kids know, and
yeah.
how do you talk to them these days about those temptations?
Yeah, my older one, who's now 18, read my book. So I do say I recommend. Teenagers love Pretty Wrecked because it's also fast to read, right? It's the vignette style, so it's what I always think about this. Like when I was a teenager and I got a book, what was the first thing I did? Oh, how many more pages in this chapter, right? You'd like look ahead and you'd be like, oh, yeah, there's like 15 more pages in the chapter. Well, the nice thing about Pretty Wrecked is like some of the chapters are 5 pages long. That's it. And so they're like, oh, I can read 5 pages. And then the next chapter is 4 pages. I can read 4 pages. And so they just find themselves going through it very quickly. I do recommend it for 10th grade and up. I do think if you're in middle school, it's probably too heavy and inappropriate. Even ninth grade, yeah, I'm not sure. 10th grade is where I say 10th and up is what I recommend.
That makes sense. I try to think of the delinquent that I was at that age, and I think I don't know that I would have been open to something like that as a
Hmm.
freshman, but as a sophomore, I think I would have been open to the perspective of someone older and wiser who had walked in my
Yeah.
feet shoes.
And it's cool. Actually, a couple schools use it as part of their health curriculum. So they use it, they read the vignettes, like when they're talking about drinking and driving as part of their health, drug and alcohol curriculum. They'll read the story in my book about drinking and driving, or, whatever the stories might be that correlate to the lesson. They'll read those because, I mean, they're way more interesting than reading a textbook or data. I'm the data. I'm the statistics.
Speaking of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, I like to end every podcast or a lot of the podcasts with the podcast time machine question. We like to think of Stuck in the 80s as a time machine. And as
Mhm.
such, you can take it back to any time or place in the past. You can relive a moment from the past. You can change a decision. You can go to an event you missed. You can tell your younger self something, anything you want to do. If we gave you a seat on the podcast time machine, when and where would you go and what would you do?
Oof. I mean, I know the answer. I don't know if I'm going to get through it without bawling my eyes out. Um, I would have stopped and talked to my grandfather before I left the house.
I remember that story.
Yeah, I would have kissed my dog and I would have apologized to my grandparents for everything I put them through, and instead of just walking out because um, you don't know. I mean, you went through a lot over the last year. You just don't know what the next day is, and those were huge losses for me. I mean, I really believe that their losses were my bottom. I don't think I think they just that destroyed me enough that I realized that my way was not working, and I didn't know what to do next, but I knew that I couldn't continue the way I was. So, despite the horror of that experience, I also believe that that was the catalyst for my change.
It's a great answer. It's a great answer. Tracy, if people are looking to buy a copy of your book, where should they go?
So it's on, I call it the Zon with my family as a joke. So it's on Amazon, paperback, a Kindle version, audiobook, the best one's on Spotify. Um, And I think you can get it on other places like barnesandnoble.com, target.com. But yes, I would just search for it. So Pretty Wrecked. Um, and if you notice, do you notice what the title looks like?
Pretty Woman,
Yep.
doesn't it?
Yep.
I just noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. So it's the same color and the same font as Pretty Woman. So,
Ah, sweet. Tracy, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story.
oh, thanks for having me. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next 80s cruise.